Good evening, and we are delighted once again to have our council meetings open to the public, so I welcome those members of the public joining us here this evening. Obviously a warm welcome as always to fellow councillors, to the staff members and executive as well, and to those watching on the streaming, which will continue. Welcome watching online. We acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we are meeting and pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and to those from other communities who are here with us today, for they hold the memories, the tradition and the culture of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Item 3, the apologies and leave of absence. I do just note one more time, or will for the next coming couple of meetings, that Councillor Kat Bennett was granted parental leave, will be returning on Friday the 9th of July from that leave. Do we have any other apologies or requests for leave, councillors? No, shaking of heads, thank you. Item 4, declaration under Acts, regulations, codes or local laws. CEO, any declarations? Thank you. The item 5, declaration by councillors of any conflict of interest. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest to disclose? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just at 8.15.
And Councillor Mildren, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 8.9 and the last one, which is 8.16.
Thank you, councillors. Item 6 is the confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, item 6, do I have a mover that minutes of 15th of March be confirmed? Thank you, Councillor Watson. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Does anybody wish to speak against? No, carried unanimously. Item 7 is the delegates' report, item which there is none. On to item 8 and 8.1, the review of the instruments of delegation. This report is a review of the instruments of delegation. It's something council must do within 12 months after a general election, and it also allows us to update the delegations where legislation has changed. Councillors, there is an officer recommendation on page 8. Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As you mentioned, as per the Local Government Act 2020, the review of the instruments, so within 12 months of our election, and affords effective and efficient running of our council to achieve our objectives. So it was interesting to see how on some other documents the Wodonga compares to other like regional councils around Victoria. And reading this recommendation that it is up for a review again potentially in October 2021, and that's something I'd be certainly advocating to review, to fall in line with some of the other like councils in potentially extending some of these delegations, particularly around the amounts the CEO has to delegate. And whilst that being the case, it's accepted in the expectation of council that whilst the instruments of delegation are in place, that the CEO has expressed that in matters of conjecture, even though it may be within his delegation, that he would bring things back to council that may be in dispute or with conjecture. So that's something that did give me great comfort with these delegations, and something I endorse and support. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, if I might give the right reserved to whoever speak later. Thank you.
Councillors. Councillor Hall.
Okay. I will not be supporting the officer recommendation in this report tonight. As a new council, and as Councillor Simpfendorfer mentioned, we have 12 months to review and adopt council delegations. It is my view that for new councils to fully understand delegations, they need to be given the opportunity beforehand to extensively review them so they actually know and understand what they are agreeing to. Yes, Maddox, our lawyers have looked at the delegations, but essentially it's up to the councillors to decide on what they want to delegate, where it is available for them to do so, and not what is given to them by council staff. Understanding what this actually means is extremely important. It's probably one of the most important things a councillor will sign off on, because at the end of the day, the councillors are usually the ones who are held accountable, whether they've made the decision or it's been delegated, or was a delegated decision made by the CEO or council officers. I'm a strong believer in council transparency. Decisions that come up to council meetings are determined by councillors, are ultimately dealt with in the public arena. This allows for wider public scrutiny and a better understanding of why decisions are made by individual councillors. We are accountable for these decisions, we make them, and when done under delegations, we don't have the same it doesn't have the same accountability. I don't believe the same accountability is applied when it doesn't come back to councillors. Because of we are the duly representatives of our community, I will often hear that from others that it will hold up processes. I don't believe that will be so. It is about transparency, councillors being accountable and able to represent the people who elect them. Community scrutiny, and we can strike a good balance with this if we have the opportunity to go through them and scrutinise every delegation we delegate to our officers and our CEO. Thank you.
I'm back in. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, members of the public. Just a short spiel from me. Section 59 of the Local Government Act 2020, council decisions are to be made by a resolution of the council. The resolution of the council is not just the resolution made at council meeting. It is also a resolution made at a meeting of a delegated committee, which sadly we do not have, and the exercise of a power by a member of council staff under delegation. What that actually means to me? Once a certain power is delegated to a member of council staff, what they decide to do under this delegation is considered to be a resolution of the council. Why this might be a problem? Firstly, this power can be used without referring back to council and without any regard to what the councillors and the community actually want. And there is complete lack of transparency, in my opinion, in delegations used in this way. Councillors and ratepayers may never even know these decisions have been made. This is why I strongly believe, it is so important for us councillors to have a very close look at the instrument of delegation in front of us today. This instrument of delegation delegates to the CEO the power to determine any issue, take any action, do any act or thing arising out of power conferred on the council by the Act, except for 7 specific powers that the elected council cannot delegate. I strongly believe that in the interest of transparency, an instrument of delegation should list specific powers delegated by council to the CEO, and that those powers should be debated and decided by the councillors. I also have a problem with the recommendation 5 to expand the CEO's delegation to include all matters that would normally be determined by the council during declared state of emergency and when council quorum cannot be reached. With the declared state of emergency being now and the council quorum being 4 councillors, I believe we are risking giving too much power to only one person without any checks and balances in place. Therefore, I won't be supporting the recommendation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There just isn't enough time to deal with all the issues that come out of this, not even close to it. At the simplest level, there are 3 types of decisions that can be made by council. There's operational decisions that are necessary for the daily functioning of council service delivery. There's strategic planning, policy, budget decisions, and there's merits-based community interest and local political issue decisions. 3 basic decisions, heaps underneath that. And there's no question whatsoever that operational matters should be delegated and pushed down into the organisation to the lowest level possible to keep functionality and to keep efficiency. There's no question about that. I just cannot accept that we should be delegating all of the other things that come out of policy, strategic planning, those sorts of decisions, but more specifically merit-based issues out of community interest and local political issues. It's pointless to delegate those, or if we do delegate those, it's pointless to have councillors. Why are we here? The Act recognises that council should be doing the strategic planning and policy and budget decisions, but what we're doing with this delegation, which seems not quite to be understood entirely, is we are handing everything that can possibly be delegated to the staff, and that power cannot be returned back to council at the volition of council. It can only be put back if the staff choose to put it back. Council officers cannot be instructed how to act under their delegation. That would be a breach of the Act. Councillors cannot go and ask questions that might be leading questions towards influencing reports and so on of officers. Even senior officers cannot override a decision of a more junior officer that has delegated power. I know that there's been informal practices in places in the past, but technically, under the new Act specifically, you cannot do that stuff. So what we are doing here is abrogating our responsibility, handing it down to a less transparent and accountable methodology where the staff can make their decisions about things. Once we have something in the budget, if, for example, don't like using examples because that becomes the focus, but for example, you can have a fund set aside in the budget for a nebulous style purpose, like for matters in the council plan, or for community grants or whatever, that is not specified the projects. If we go down this path, then potentially the staff can make all those decisions, even though they might be decisions of community interest or local political issues or merits-based issues. That does not come back to council. And I certainly don't accept the point that, or any reference that, oh, well, give me the powers, or give the powers to the CEO, but I'll be a benevolent person because the next person might not be, and I'll bring stuff back if I feel that the council wants to hear about it and the council wants the decision. That's not the way the world works. And to hand this stuff across the way we're doing without sitting down and thoroughly understanding exactly what we're doing, I think is an abrogation of our responsibility, and it's remiss of us entirely. If you look at the instrument of delegation to the CEO, there is not one item out of the new Local Government Act that can be delegated that we're withholding to the council. Not one item. If you look at the instrument of delegation, it makes it perfectly clear. So the only things that we're exempting are the things that the Act won't let us hand over to the CEO, and for the CEO to hand down the line. Now, I'm not being critical of delegation in itself. We must have delegation, and it's a functionality that we must have, and we have to get the balance right. The way we're doing this at the moment is we are handing everything to the staff and keeping nothing for the council effectively, other than those things that the Act won't allow us to delegate. And indeed, as Councillor Quilty said, with the emergency powers in place and the resolution inclusive of the emergency powers, we're actually handing over things that I suspect we're probably not allowed to delegate unless there's some clause in there somewhere that says, oh, in emergency situations you can delegate everything. It just doesn't sit right with me, and I don't think we should be doing it, and I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Milton. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll endorse everything that my fellow colleague Councillor Graham Simpendorfer said, is that this will be going back for another review on October 18th, or it should be scheduled before the October meeting 21. But we must have trust in our CEO and staff, and what we're here, which one of our fellow councillors said, why are we here? We're here to be a strategic planner for this city and take this council into the future. And we need the business of council to be undertaken. So I believe we don't have the trust with our CEO and our staff, you know, we'll have a lot of issues, and I see no problem with putting the power with our staff. They're the ones that have planned, they've got all the qualifications in the fields that they are involved in, particularly emergency services. That automatically goes to our emergency service operators. So I'm more than happy to bring this back in October to have another review and to work, and as what people might say, workshop it, and we can go into it in quite detail. But very happy for tonight for the recommendation to go through.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer in closing.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in closing, I acknowledge the different views around the table, and it's good to see that debate come out. In closing, though, I just feel that if these delegations as systems were so, I guess, broken or needed revising, then our city wouldn't look as good as what it does today. I think we're moving forward very well, and I think we need to continue moving forward in that direction. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer and councillors. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All opposed? Councillor Hall's called the division. So all in favour, just once again. Councillor Simpfendorfer, Councillor Watson, Councillor Polton. All those opposed? Councillor Quilty, Councillor Mildren, Councillor Hall. We have a tied vote. 3 apiece. I'll exercise the casting vote by voting for the motion. I therefore declare the motion carried for item 8.1. Item 8.2, Councillors, Gifts, Benefits and Hospitality Policy. Councillors, this report presents a councillor gift policy which we are required to have under the Local Government Act. Once again, a recommendation on page 119. Do I have a councillor to move the recommendation? Councillor Watson, fighting over it. Thank you. A seconder. Councillor sorry, did I see Councillor Simpfendorfer? Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, I think some of my fellow councillors talked about transparency already tonight, and I think this is one of those areas where we as councillors have got to be very transparent in what happens in our community, and when we're invited to functions or gifts are given to us or benefits are given to us. So this policy is a very good thing to make sure what is the right procedures to undertake when those gifts and benefits are given to or given to the council. So more than happy for this policy to go out.
Councillor Simpfendorfer.
I'll reserve the right. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Hall.
Look, I'm going to support this policy. We need a policy that clearly sets out guidelines on what is acceptable and what is not in regards to gifts, benefits and hospitality. And so I think that's a good thing, and I think it's a good policy. I'll be accepting it.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Mildren, Quilty? No? Councillor Simpfendorfer? No? Councillor Watson?
Mr Mayor, just in closing, I think we've come a long way in local government from the early days of gifts and under current processes. So, yeah, very happy that we're moving forward in times and open and transparent.
Thank you, councillors. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Item 8.3 is our international relations policy. This report reviews the international relations policy and recommends that the policy be revoked. There's an officer recommendation on page 127. Would somebody like to move the motion? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer, as per the recommendation. Thank you. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Yeah, I think the policy replication is fairly unremarkable in the context of our environment in 2020-21. It doesn't remove their capability to develop those relationships as it states in other fields or professions, and if that environment does change in years to come, then I guess we can fall in line with that if we need to. But I'll be supporting that as per the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Quilty. Other councillors? Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Irrespective of what we think about this stuff, this policy is redundant anyway because the federal government have brought in a whole range of changes to international relationships that might be had by levels of government inclusive of local government. So I think getting rid of it's immaterial, but that's what we should be doing. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hall.
Look, yeah, I never saw the need for this policy when we first adopted it at council a few years ago. Things like international travel, I know it's more than that, but in the policy, but I don't think it's ever warranted by council staff or councillors. We can deal with most of the issues mentioned in the report without the need for a policy. We can always work, bring things up to council and deal with them individually. So I support the officer recommendation to revoke this policy tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Watson, no. In closing, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Right, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried unanimously. 8.4 is the Councillor Professional Development Policy. The report reviews the Councillor Professional Development Policy and recommends it to be placed on public exhibition. There is a recommendation on page 134. Do I have somebody prepared to move? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer, as per the recommendation. Thank you. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
The Council of Professional Development, I guess, is an expectation from our community that we maintain currency and contemporary nature of what we do in representing them. So I support it. It's within the budget from what we read. So I think it's the best way moving forward to make sure that we give the best to our community and our professional development as a group and individually.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I am getting a bit lax with the microphone there. I just think, once again, we are starting to do things like automatically we're now doing a skill set induction training, which is so important. I think this year's induction training for new councillors and previous councillors, it was fantastic. So it's just bringing together teaching us some great skill sets. From my time that I've been in local government, the training's only getting better and better, so I think it's an important thing to have.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I apologise for yelling at the microphone before. I will try to show a bit less passion. Please stop me if I'm not successful. Anyway, I will be voting in favour. However, I would like to add a couple of minor comments. I believe it is personal responsibility of every councillor to be frugal and to spend the ratepayers' money wisely. Every councillor should, and I'm sure that they will, have the best interest of the community at heart when deciding what training, including associated travel and accommodation expenses, they would like to participate in. The ratepayers should, and I'm sure they will, judge us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Mildren.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's interesting, the new Local Government Act prescribes that councillors must do induction training, and it specifies some of the things that must be included in that. Effectively, this makes it compulsory for the council to include a budget component that addresses the compulsory training. So it's another imposition from the state government on the council. Some components of the induction training seem to reflect more political correctness, identity politics and tribalism, all of which I'm yet to be convinced of the value of. And that seems to be something that's heading more and more into the realms of local government and probably even goes to the level of the things we discussed in regard to the way delegations get applied. The policy also makes provision for councillor attendance at special training programs and at relevant conferences and for networking opportunities. I see good value in councillors attending specific training that is offering a direct advancement in the knowledge of the councillor in regard to matters associated with being a councillor. And I see good value in networking both locally and more broadly where connections may be made or knowledge obtained which is directly enhancing the council and community interest. I say it like that because I think there are some very good positives to be gained, but if we aren't frugal and we don't do it in a focused manner and we head off to any number of random activities and conferences, we won't be focusing the expenditure of ratepayers' money, and we won't be carrying out the things in the manner that Councillor Quilty raised. So I support this policy, but I put the caveat across it that we should be judicial in the way we apply it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, there was a Madam Mayor in there. 6 months later, Councillor Mildred. That's a slab. Councillor Hall, did you have anything to add?
No, but I think what councillors have, their views that they've put forward are good views, and I think, you know, that is something that we as councillors do have to be mindful of, and I'm definitely mindful of, and I'm sure all the other councillors are too.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. In closing, Councillor Simpfendorfer, no further commentary. I'll therefore put the motion. All in favour? Carried unanimously. 8.5 is the Mayoral Robe and Chain policy, whether the robe and chain should remain as part of the official regalia. Councillors, there's an officer recommendation on page 144. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hall, as per the recommendation.
I would like to move an alternative motion. I've got one here. I'll give to the Kevin, is that right? I'll read it out. Okay, I move that the mayoral robe and chain policy be retained, that an investigation be taken without delay to ascertain the physical condition of the mayoral robe and what work, if any, is necessary to repair or maintain the condition of the robe, and a report be brought back to council at or before July 2021 meeting of the council, and that an ongoing budget provision be made for maintenance and appropriate protective storage of the mayoral robe and chain. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. Okay. It is my view that at certain ceremonies and events, the mayor of the day should have the choice to choose whether they want to wear either both garment and chain or just the chain. One example of this would be the citizenship ceremonies. The mayor wearing, say, the mayoral chain gives the mayor the ceremony an element of respect and importance, which I feel it deserves. I believe the importance of this has been lost over the years. Our new citizens are generally very respectful and elated to be receiving their citizenships. They are often dressed in their best, and we don't seem to honour that. I think it would be an honour to them if the mayor of the day were to wear the mayoral chain. It would be just a nice, respectful touch to give to the ceremony. This is just one incident that I'm giving an example of. I think in doing so helps to elevate the importance of the position of the mayor in our city. This motion seeks to give the mayor of their day the ability to choose what he or she determines to be suitable for them, whether they want to wear the robe and chain or just the chain or neither at ceremony events. Should be a choice the mayor feels free and comfortable to make. So I would like to give them at least that option and have it looked at. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Mildren.
Reserve, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it is a very interesting proposition. Councillors, I would like to mention, Councillor Hall mentioned Australia Day. I would like to tell you a short story about my own Australia Day that I will always remember. It was a few years ago, and it was the day when I received Australian citizenship, one of the very important days of my life. And it was in Wagga Wagga. It was a very hot day, and the mayor of Wagga Wagga of the day was wearing the robe lined with fur and the chain, and his face was the color of tomato. I thought it was very heroic of him. I thought he looked very grand, And if our mayor, current mayor, future mayors decide and the councillors decide that the mayor is to wear a robe and chain, I think it will look very grand. I hope it will be worthwhile the ratepayers' money to maintain it. I'd be interested to see the cost of it. And I think it will be a heroic deed on some occasions, like Australia Day when it's very hot, and it will be showing enormous respect to the community. Generally, I'm on the side of being frugal and always for being frugal, but there is place for ceremony in our life, I must admit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Simpfendorfer, Watson.
Yeah, thank you. I guess coming into reading that recommendation, I was fairly sitting in the place of, is it needed in this environment in 2021? But just after hearing Councillor Hall and Councillor Quilty, I think I'll support the motion as well. I think it should be a matter for choice, and it will be interesting to see what condition. But just based on the history, I think what it does bring to that, I think I'll support that as well. Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't support the motion. I think the position of mayor, we have to gain the person's got to gain the respect of the community and its people, and just by wearing some probably very traditional get up and garb doesn't need to say that you're not respected as the mayor of the day and associated. I'd like to think if the actual cost in the motion, like it might just really completely blow out. And is that worth the money spent on our ratepayers? So I will speak against the motion, Mr. Mayor, for two reasons. One is that we are going into a new era of leadership and what happens in local government. And secondly, the cost to the ratepayer if it is an extraordinary amount of money to maintain it and to keep it in order.
Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The functions of council are diverse and quite varied, but importantly include a considerable symbolism that, amongst other things, enhances cohesiveness and connectivity of the community through a whole range of ceremonial events. And they are ceremonial events. Now, I'm aware that the former Mayor Mark Byatt consistently used the chain in citizenship ceremonies. I'm also aware that the immediate past Mayor didn't choose to use it or use any of the robe or chains. And I think it's important that we give freedom of choice to individual mayors, but I think it's also important that we recognise that we should retain the connection with our past and our history, because history is what we learn from. If we cut it off and discard it, then we're not going to learn from it. So I think it's important in that context that we retain the capability. As much as it may not currently be politically correct to maintain traditions and ceremonial practices associated with, probably you could say, conservative values, we don't know when the cycle's going to turn. We don't know when things will change and the pendulum will swing back the other way, and we'll have got rid of it, an item that does give that connection to history. So I think Libby's motion is to the point of dealing with all those sort of things. What the mayoral robe and chain does is not create a trust or any sort of thing in the person that wears it in the day. The ceremonial, it gives ceremonial identification for the position and not for the individual. So it's not a matter of respect to the individual. I agree with Councillor Watson that the individuals, all of us, need to earn respect of our community and each other, and being elected is one way of earning or showing that you've earned respect, etc. But this is not about that. It's about a respect for the position and an identification of the position. So if the Mayor of the Day chooses to use it, it's underpinning that. So I think the motion is a good motion. It's open and gives us options if it turns out that it's going to be an absolutely incredible impost on our budget to maintain or improve the robes and or the chain. I think we need to also remember what the value of the chain is, because set aside the ceremonial value and other things, I'm quite sure it will have a monetary value of some significance. I believe it was valued, over 10 years ago in the tens of thousands of dollars, and if it is consisting of elements of gold, then I'm sure that's going to be worth a lot more in today's world, because gold is quite expensive right at the minute. So I think we need to have that information, we need to understand it, and we need to lock that away in the process of carrying out what this resolution, what this motion provides for. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall, if I can just request, I'm not sure if you have anything to say in closing, but I'd just like you, just for the clarification of all councillors, just to read your motion again, just so we all know what we're voting on. Thank you, that'd be great.
That the mayoral robe and chain policy be retained, that an investigation be undertaken without delay to ascertain the physical condition of the mayoral robe and what work, if any, is necessary to repair or maintain the condition of the robe, and a report be brought back to council at or before the July 2021 meeting of council, and that an ongoing budget provision be made for maintenance and appropriate protective storage of the mayoral robe and chain.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Thank you. Carried. Item 8.6 of the Wodonga Gold Cup Public Holiday. Councillors, the purpose of the report before you is for the council to consider a request from Racing Wodonga to extend by 5 years the public holidays for the Wodonga Gold Cup. There is a recommendation on page 149. Councillors, do I have somebody to move? Councillor Watson, seconder. Is that as per the recommendation, Councillor Watson? Yep. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, I think this the policy, not the policy, the request for a further 5 years from Racing Victoria or Racing Wodonga is a good one. It's a good one because our city doesn't have a lot to celebrate, and this is a great time we can celebrate in many ways. It's not all about racing, but it is about investment in our community. Investment in our community where the women and the men of the day can dress up and spend money in our city, but also people visiting our city can spend money in our economy. So I also like continuity, and business, I am sure, now knows that we're having this race event in November and not at the Melbourne Cup time. And those who wish to do the Melbourne Cup can take annual leave or whatsoever. But I think it's a very positive thing for our city. It certainly brings large amounts of investment to our town, but also for our small traders in our town, hairdressers, beautician, dress shops, men's shops. So it's a really important day for our city. And also, we could really promote Melbourne Cup Day. So come up to Albury Wodonga, because here's a great place to visit when those who do not wish to go to a Melbourne Cup function in Melbourne, they can come up here. So, Mr. Mayor, I think a great report, and let's keep pushing this great event in our city. We don't have many social events in our city to celebrate.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with what Councillor Watson said. Having read that report and some of the numbers on page 157 displaying the economic impact of over $1 million in 2019, over 500 interstate visitors in 2019. It's been growing every year since inception. We all know the success it had in 2019. I guess the point for me came to 5 years and whether that, where that sat and that extension sat. But look, it's going to impact some businesses, there's no doubt. It's going to impact on some, but the overwhelming majority from what the feedback I've received is that 5 years affords some consistency and planning. It does go very quickly, that time, and those businesses that need to plan ahead can have that time to know that it's in place. So So that's why we're supporting the recommendation as it stands. So.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillors. Councillor Miltron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's two things in Wodonga that have generated the most contact by residents and people of Wodonga with me, and that is this public holiday and dogs and animal or management and welfare. I acknowledge the very divisive issue. This is a very divisive issue in our community, and I have had connection. It's about a 50-50 balance between people who have come to me and said, we can't afford to have this imposition on our business, and others who say this is great and it's generating, you know, work and income to our businesses and we make good money out of the event and it's great for Wodonga. So it's about a 50-50 mix on the people that have come and spoken to me, and there's a lot of people that have. I've seen and heard the information indicating the economic benefits of the event and the assertion that growth in popularity is directly associated with the public holiday. I'm not entirely convinced of that direct correlation, particularly in that the public holiday is only in Wodonga, and with the knowledge that a lot of Wodonga residents work in Albury and therefore don't get the holiday, and also that surrounding municipalities don't have a holiday, there's sort of there's a disconnect in that alleged correlation. I don't think that's as firm as what perhaps we're being led to accept. I've heard the view that the public holiday is an unnecessary imposition on local businesses that do not get a direct or indirect benefit from the event. They have to pay penalty wage rates for the day, and inevitably they have at least a part-day imposition on productivity on Melbourne Cup Day as staff stop work to celebrate and watch the Melbourne Cup. So there's some businesses that are copping it both times. I'm also aware of the past use of the event and holiday to have business Christmas events at the Wodonga Gold Cup, but I'm uncertain as to the COVID-19 impacts of both business Christmas parties generally and the possible perceived implications and liability of business gatherings in numbers. So this year the event might get impacted, but I don't think that's a legitimate reason into the future. I think it'll bounce back at some point. I think the event is an absolutely excellent event, but it's way short of what its potential is. And I think in terms of where it is right at this minute, it's probably getting close to a point where it needs an injection of something different, a little bit the next step, to go the next step, and then there'll be another next step required in a period of time after that to maintain the event and to improve the event and to turn it into a truly big event. It is a considerable event in Wodonga, but there are a number of other events that happen locally that would match it. So I think this has the potential to be a very big event for Wodonga, but it needs to keep taking the steps, and it needs, and we need to be changing what and how we go about these sort of things. And I guess I'm looking at advice back to the racing club in regard to that. I think the introduction of having a very well-renowned band come to the event was absolutely brilliant. And I think the increase in the numbers that have happened in recent times is almost certainly a direct correlation to that. Particularly if you look at the numbers, my understanding is that the vast majority of increase in numbers have been relatively younger people. I think there's an opportunity here that we should be investigating to link the Albury Gold Cup and the Wodonga Gold Cup, having an event in March and an event in November, and having the whole city having a public holiday for each. I think there's an opportunity we should be exploring there. I don't know how that could be manifest, but I think by passing the resolution we're passing now, we're cutting that option off, and we're making things not possible. I would have liked to have seen a resolution that supported the event, but deferred this decision for a short period of time so we could go away and investigate some of those things that might just lift it up to the next level as well. I think by passing the resolution we've got before us, we're not doing justice to the event, and I don't think we're doing justice to the people that are organising and running the program and giving them an opportunity to work with us and potentially Albury City to lift the whole process of these two events. So my inclination is not to support this motion on that basis, not because I don't agree that we should be having a holiday, but because I think we're actually cutting off our options and missing opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall or Councillor Hall, thank you.
Yeah, look, I never really thought about what Councillor Mildren has said, but it is something that probably needs to be thought about going forward. Over the last few years, I've personally held different views on this public holiday, but as a councillor representing the community, I can see both the advantages and disadvantages with this day being a public holiday. Many people come up with, you get many people over the years have come forward with their concerns about horse racing in general. Some just don't like it, and others, you know, are very keen on it. And problems with businesses having this day designated public holiday, like Councillor Mildren has alluded to. The Wodonga Cup has continued to make a mark and make its position held as one of the city's major events. It is well attended. I've been numerous times myself, and it is a well run and a good event. It draws many visitors from the community and from outside of the community. And the figures provided to council support this. There are many economic benefits to some, I must say, some of the local businesses and the community as a whole. But, you know, I'm sort of looking at what Councillor Mildren has said, and maybe we should be... Look, the 5-year is, to me, is just a bit long. That's last council this come up, and we had the same 5-year choice to make a decision on, and we cut it back to 3. I suppose allowing for this new council to make that decision. And I'm just wondering whether we should be doing the same for the following council. You know, 5 years is a fair whack of time, and when it does come back, it does give the chance to review and bring up discussions on, you know, how it's going and where it needs to go. And like Councillor Mildren has mentioned, maybe we should be looking at some things a bit differently. So, yeah, not sure what I'm doing with this one yet, but we'll see.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Quilty?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I have come to this meeting with the intention to support this recommendation. However, I have also, as always, come here with a mind open to persuasion. And on listening to what Councillor Mildren has just said, using the opportunities to elevate this event, I think it's a really good event for our city. I think it's actually a very good idea to try and coordinate this with Albury. This will not only solve the problem for the likes of me who has children at school in Wodonga and their job in Albury, but it will potentially and very likely increase the participation in both events, in Albury Gold Cup, in Wodonga Gold Cup. It may, there may be pluses and minuses for trying to coordinate it as a whole day or as a half a day. But yeah, I just think that if we now vote for it, we probably won't revisit it for 5 years. And I think it's worthwhile revisiting it just for the purpose of elevating it. And while I'm for this day, just as a good event, as an opportunity to attract visitors, I think we probably should spend a bit more time thinking about it and deciding how we can elevate this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Simpendorfer, in closing. Oh, sorry, hang on. You're right, Councillor Watson. Question, Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is a little bit left field, but do and maybe there isn't an answer right now, but do we have the ability to do the same to the AFL Grand Final Day public holiday as what we do to the Melbourne Cup Day public holiday? Can we transfer that to another day? And secondly, Mr Mayor, in the event that this motion might get lost, I foreshadow that I have another motion. It's just
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. CEO, do we have an answer? I'm going to guess that you're going to say take that on notice.
Well, it's not really part of the resolution or the paper, so I don't think it's relevant. We'd have to take that on notice.
Mr Mayor, I didn't ask the CEO to tell me whether it's relevant or not. I asked him for an answer to the question.
And it has been taken on notice, Councillor Mildren. Yep. Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Sorry, Councillor Watson in closing.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm a little bit confused around my colleagues around the table tonight because some of them are negative to it, but then they're very positive to it as well. So it's pleasing to see that they believe that the event is a good thing. What Racing Wodonga wants us to do is just to make sure the public holiday is gazetted for the dates in 2022, 23, 24, 25 and 26. So I'm sure that Racing Wodonga would love to hear more feedback from our city on how to improve it, but I believe they're doing a very good job in their own committee of running the event. So with all that said and done, it gives the next council term to decide what happens, but we know there's continuity for our community, for our businesses, and for everything else that goes on in our city. It's going to be a great day. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? All right, once again, we have a 3-3 tie. I'll exercise the casting vote by voting for the motion. Motion is carried. On to item 8.7, the new dog park proposal, Willow Park. As Councillor Mildren mentioned a moment ago, this is one that has had a lot of community engagement with councillors on. The report summarises the community engagement for the proposed dog park at Willow Park and provides an option to advance dog park facilities within the city. Councillors, an officer recommendation on page 177. Do I have somebody happy to move it as per the recommendation, Councillor Hall, or have you got another? I would like to move an alternative. Please read your alternative motion.
Okay, I propose I propose to move a motion that that mostly opposing community opinions regarding the dog park proposal at Willow Park, including the petition, be received and noted. 2, the dog park as recently proposed at Willow Park not proceed. 3, a detailed listing of all council-owned and controlled land of sufficient size to contain a dog park to the south or west of Wodonga be reported back to council at or before August council meeting with an assessment of the pros and cons of sustainability of each parcel of land for establishment of a dog park. Okay. Okay, I'd just like to give a bit of background to the dog park proposal. In 2019-2020 budget, it was decided that there was a need for another dog park in Wodonga. $50,000 was allocated in that budget. It was also identified that a dog park was needed to cater for residents in the west or south areas of Wodonga. The dog park was not constructed in 2019-2020 for a couple of reasons. COVID was mentioned and the allowance of $50,000 was believed to not be enough or adequate to construct the required dog park that was needed. We're needing a separate or whether it's combined large and dog small area. So the dog park was budgeted in 2020-21 with a new allocated amount of $100,000. Public consultations were done, and from what council officers' report states, the surveying council did in the choice of areas for a dog park found that Willow Park was the preferred option. This went out to the public for consultation. Many submissions received from the community members who did not support the council officers identified Willow Park position. I actually went to the public consultation myself. There was about 40 community members or people in attendance. I met and spoke with many of the people who were not happy about the dog park being proposed at Willow Park. Some suggested a refurbishment and extension of the Belvoir Park at Assumption Gardens. And this seems to have been what was picked up by the council officers and was made the preferred recommendation in this report. It was decided 2 years ago another dog park was required in West or South Wodonga, and this was picked up in our council plan, and that's why it was budgeted for in that budgeted year. To wait possibly more years for a new land development to come on board to provide areas within the land developments for another dog park that was identified 2 years ago. I just don't think the community will wear that one. While the dog park at Belvoir could do with some upgrades, and I agree with that, I do not support the extension of this dog park in lieu of not providing the dog park that was identified and needed in the West or South Wodonga areas and budgeted for 2 years ago. So it is my view that we really do need to identify another position, as I stated in my motion. Willow Park is not in the option anymore, and one that is acceptable to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Mildred? Reserve the right. Thank you. Councillors? Thank you, Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, should this recommendation fail, I'd like to make sure that the current recommendation on the books is put on. Sometimes it's a bit like not in my backyard syndrome, but I understand completely with the residents, and what we've done, I think, has been very good to come back and understand that they weren't happy with that situation. With recommend point 4 of the officer's recommendation to consider in the subdivision, that is very open and transparent and letting community know exactly where something would be in the future, so there is no community backlash. So I will be voting against the motion that Councillor Hall is putting up because I believe we've got some great positions going forward with this recommendation that was put by the officers, so I will be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Quilty, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the proposition put forward by Councillor Hall. I don't see any reason to vote against it. I believe that for our growing city and with a lot of residents having furry friends, two places to exercise them is better than one place. And since it's been going for such a long time, so many people do want it, and an amount has been budgeted. Whether it will be, like I always say, it will be interesting to see the costing. However, I don't see any reason why I would vote against Councillor Hall's proposed motion. It has, I can see the benefits of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Yeah, I'm in two minds here. I think I do take the point that Councillor Hall's put forward. I think there's some real relevance in that it was identified that there needs to be something in the west and the south, and that's almost a given from what we're hearing from the community. At the same time, also, we need, I guess, that quick win for what's needed in that space. There are issues around town with dogs off leash and where they can walk their dogs and all those issues, but that's probably more around responsible ownership than what's happening at a dog park. And certainly Belvoir does need, further enhancement. I think that's a given as well. I did notice online today there's a fair few comments online today about inviting councillors down to have a chat with those that use it. Been in two minds. I see the points on both recommendations. I'm a bit undecided at this stage, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Mildred.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not entirely satisfied with the way this matter's been dealt with. Point 3 of the resolution on the 17th of August 2020 provided that consultation commence with the community to find a suitable location for Wodonga's next gated dog park. I apologise if I'm in error in interpretation, but I interpret the resolution as undertaking consultation to find a suitable location rather than to go out to consultation with one seemingly arbitrarily determined option being effectively over the back fence of numerous residents at Willow Park. Again, that Willow Park option never came back for a decision of council for consideration of the council before it went out to consultation. I fail to see how it could genuinely be believed that establishing a dog park in very close proximity to residential backyards would be acceptable. At the most basic level, such a proposition fails to consider, or worse, treats the amenity of residents with a level of contempt. Irrespective, my expectation was for a report back that rationally and comprehensively considered 3, maybe 4, maybe 5, or maybe more options, providing an evaluation of the pros and cons of each option. Conceivably, I could have accepted a report that did this and concluded that there are no suitable options and provided adequate justification for that conclusion. We didn't get that sort of information. That's not the way it unfolded. It's been said to me by several Wodonga residents that they do not believe that council has any genuine intent to provide a dog park to service the south and southwest of Wodonga. The inference in that is that I, as a councillor, have at least been complicit in conspiring to make it look like we are trying to do something to provide the dog park, but in fact have no intention to do so. That message has been conveyed to me on several occasions. If there is no immediately available suitable location to service the area, I believe the report, including providing evaluation of the options considered, should have explicitly said so and identified and articulated a plausible and very near-term path to solution. When we talk about going into and planning this stuff out in the urban planning areas of Wodonga, the areas that are relevant to where this dog park should be have already been locked in, planned, and have been for some time. And even if you extend it out into the Leneva-Barranduda area, it's already done. The planning has already been locked into place. We have a structure plan and a developer contributions plan locked in for Barranduda-Leneva, and all the land back this side of Wodonga is already locked in. So to come up and say, oh, well, we'll try and do it into the planning, well, that means we're going out to the next level, which is probably 30 years, maybe, give or take, into the future, and we're not going to provide the service in the location that we've identified this as a necessary place to have it. So I can't come to terms with that as a reality, and I find the recommendation that was put up from staff in that context perplexing, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of urban planning. Extending the Belvoir Park dog park may be desirable, and yes, I accept that there's upgrades and certain things that need to be done to improve it, but extending it to the level necessary to accommodate what we've identified over the journey as necessary for South and West Wodonga, and by doing it just by extending the fence, doesn't consider what the impacts are on Belvoir Park, what extra car parking we need, what extra accessibility we need, what it does for the streets leading to get into the place, what other infrastructure, toilets or other things that might be necessary. It doesn't consider what impositions we're placing into that area by extending the existing park there. And those sorts of things need to be considered equally on any other site that we look at. That should be part of the pros and cons that go to forming a report that comes back to the council. So we've recently heard that in the south and west of Wodonga, I think Councillor Simpendorfer referred to it, but we've recently heard of issues with dogs that have been off leash in areas out there. If that problem may well be, at least in part, remedied if we had an appropriate place in south or west Wodonga. So I'm supporting Councillor Hall Hall's motion on that basis. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall, I know I'll give you the chance to close, but also just once again, if you could read out your motion.
Yes, look, we identified in the council plan over 2 years ago, and you know it has dragged on. I know we've had COVID and those sort of issues come up, but we really need to cater not just for one area. Look, I love Assumption Gardens, and I like the dog park there. It does need some work on it. I agree. It wouldn't take too much to bring it up a bit, but I don't support extending it. I think it would detract from the area, to be quite honest. And I think the dog park needs to be closer to the other side, where there's a lot of residential housing. It's accessible for people on that side of town. And, you know, how long do we wait? Okay. I propose a motion for the dog park that, one, the mostly opposing community opinions regarding the dog park proposal at Willow Park, including the petition, be received and noted. Two, the dog park as recently proposed at Willow Park not proceed. Three, a detailed listing of all council-owned and controlled land of sufficient size to contain a dog park to the south or west of Wodonga be reported back to council at or before the council August meeting with an assessment on the pros and cons of suitability of each parcel of land for the establishment of a dog park.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All opposed? Once again, we have a tied vote. I'll exercise the casting vote by voting against the motion. Councillors, do I have another motion? I believe, Councillor Watson, did you foreshadow the recommendation? Division? Yep, certainly. So all those four, once again, was Councillor Hall, Councillor Mildren and Councillor Quilty. All those against was Councillor Watson, Councillor Simpfendorfer, Councillor Polton, and the motion carried through the casting, defeated through the casting vote. So, Councillor Watson, I'm going to guess that you were going to foreshadow by moving as per the recommendation. Is that correct?
Mr Mayor, that's correct. So I'll move the recommendation that is on page 177.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, I don't think there's any further discussion required.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillors, thank you, Councillor Mildren.
Mr Mayor, clearly I'm going to speak against this. At least even in dot point 4, council consider future subdivisions. So how far out are we going with this? We have to, if we're going to include future subdivisions, it has to be in areas where we can actually have some influence in the planning of that. So it has to be areas that aren't already planned, which puts it at least 30 years into the future, at least that. So I find this as absolute nonsense, and I don't know where we're going with this stuff, but this is irresponsible. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillors? Thanks, Councillor Hall.
I totally agree with Councillor Mildren's comments, and it's really disappointing because I've been on with this since 2019, and I really am disappointed with it.
Councillors? In closing, Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And in in the reply to Councillor Mildren, I'm sure that amendments occur and negotiations occur in planning, and I can see lots of things can happen. So enough said.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillors, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those opposed? We have a tied vote, 3 apiece again, therefore I'll use my casting vote to carry the motion. No, you're right. No, definitely division. So once again, for Councillor Watson, Councillor Simpfendorfer, Councillor Polton, against Councillor Mildren, Councillor Quilty, Councillor Hall. Thank you, Councillor Hall. And I've carried the motion by voting with the casting vote. On to item 8.8, the sponsorship and donations policy. Reviews the sponsorship and donations policy, pretty self-explanatory, but there is a recommendation on page 191, councillors. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Quilty, as per the recommendation. Oh, no, go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move an alternative motion. I move that the sponsorship and donations policy be revoked and that all the amounts allocated in the budget to sponsorship and donations for the 2021-22 financial year be returned for budget allocation.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I mentioned a number of times in previous council meetings, I do admire the generosity and the community spirit of all Australians and of Wodonga ratepayers in particular. However, I do strongly believe that it is not the role of the council to donate ratepayers' money. We are very fortunate to have lots of great community groups and dedicated volunteers in Wodonga. I believe it is up to each individual ratepayer to choose which cause they want to give their hard-earned money to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Mildren. Reserve the right, councillors. Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, I'll be speaking against, I'll vote against the motion and preempt the putting the recommendation of the officer's motion if it doesn't get it.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Yeah, I too, I think will be voting against the motion that's been put forward. I see the point that's been raised. However, now better understanding through the process of the assessment process that's undertaken in this space is quite stringent and quite respected from what I understand now as to how the decisions are made around some of that sponsorship. But I guess whilst I respect the view of Councillor Quilty and Councillor Mildren in moving this motion, I don't think I'll be supporting on this occasion.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Hall, did you have anything to add?
Look, I've from time to time supported the policy or what was put up, but I do have some. I look, because there's so many different requests in it. I just think we probably need to do something a little bit differently and be a bit more stringent with it, and maybe we should be looking at things coming up through submissions to the budget going forward and looking at it as an annual thing, maybe. That's my view.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I came prepared to speak against the recommendation, and I'm happy to hear the motion and second it. But I have a philosophical opposition to the use of ratepayers' money for welfare transfer payments in any form. Now, if that makes me a right-wing person, then so be it. And I would have expected there's probably more of us around the room than what there appears. But donations are in essence a form of transfer payment and a misuse of ratepayers' funds that are not paid to council to be donated to others. This has nothing to do with the merits of community values or activities of those that have been seeking the funds. They're perfectly good organisations, and in the broader sense, our communities should be supporting them. And they do, lots of them do wonderful things, some of them to better or worse, but lots of them do wonderful things. So it's not an aspersion or anything against any of those organisations. We just shouldn't be using ratepayers' money as donations. Ratepayers pay council for provision of services, unlike other levels of state and Commonwealth governments that have a taxation system for collection of consolidated revenue not connected to specific service provision. The role and function of local government is by and large to provide services to the local community. It's not to be providing welfare nets in that nature, in that context. The federal and state government provide grants on a regular basis that we as council have staff that could be assisting these community groups to seek those grants. There may be limited circumstances a place for council to sponsor a community event, and these should be budget specifically identified, but general sponsorship of for-profit or not-for-profit companies or charity events are like donations and are a misuse of ratepayers' money. The general position should be that Council does not provide sponsorship except on individual case merits for a community event run by a community organisation that is not a charity, not-for-profit company or a private or public business, and Council considers that the event provides a broad community appeal. And in that context, it should be an event that fits into what the Council's role and responsibilities are under the Act. In that context, I can't support, in fact, I don't believe we should be having a fund set aside for this stuff. Philosophically, I don't believe we should be putting these sorts of funds into our budget where we don't have it specifically allocated to projects at the budget stage. I believe this is a responsibility of the Council. I know we've just passed delegations that say otherwise, but I believe the Councillors should be 100% in control of what our budget gets spent on, and putting a global budget piece together that can be later on be determined, irrespective of how good a policy you might have in place or anything else, to me is not a proper and honest and open, transparent way of running our budget and running our businesses, our business of Council. So I believe we should be running this stuff up to each budget at each annual basis, on an annual basis up to each budget. We'll leave it at that for the time being. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. In closing, Councillor Quilty.
I don't have any further comments. I'm very glad to hear that Councillor Mildren is on the same page. He hasn't just summed up, he has expanded on my points of view. So I believe any further comments, no, I don't have any further comments. Thank you. Sure, thank you. So the motion is that the sponsorship and donations policy be revoked, and that all the amounts allocated in the budget to sponsorships and donations for 2021-2022 financial year be returned for budget allocation.
Just hold on to it for now, thank you. Councillors, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? We have a tied vote once again. Councillors, did you want me to record that one before I go further? Yes? Yeah? Okay. So 3-3, exercise the casting vote once again. I'll vote against the motion, therefore the motion is defeated. Councillors, so those that were in favour of the motion, once again, was Councillor Hall, Councillor Mildren and Councillor Quilty. Those that were against were Councillor Simpfendorfer, Councillor Watson and Councillor Polton, and defeated. Councillors, I look for a motion there. Councillor Watson.
I foreshadowed that to put the recommendation of the officers that the sponsorship and donation policy be attached, be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, I do sadden to hear some of the comments around the table where some of our sponsorship and donations, some great charities and great things our city to city. There's some great things in our city that we sponsor and we look after and we promote. And to see if that goes, and it has to come through a budget process, which this comes through a budget process anyway, like it is in our budget, that the amount of money that we will put aside for sponsorship and donations. So with all that said, Mr. Mayor, I'm in favour of the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
I just, my thinking behind this and accepting this recommendation as it stands is that, as I mentioned earlier, that the process is quite stringent, and there's a good committee that sits and meets with that. If we need to look at reviewing that policy and what framework sits behind that, then so be it. But our ratepayers are part of a lot of these community groups, whether it be kids or adults, and I think it develops that relationship as a council that we support them in what is effectively a minority fiscal amount on occasions. They're not over-exhaustive, whilst I take on the points that it does form part of the budget we're responsible for. I think it connects us with our community as supporting them in a fiscal way, to in turn support, as I said, the adults and the kids that are part of our community and part of our ratepayers in that space. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillors? Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I would like to respond, not to respond, but to support Councillor Watson in saying that we do, and I believe I've already mentioned that we do have lots of great charities and lots of great community groups. And I think we as individuals, as ratepayers, are very well placed to support them from our after-tax money. And secondly, I think that it's not about the amount of money that we fiscally support with. Amount of money can be big or small, it is still money, and it is very relative. For some people or organizations, a small amount may be a big amount for others. And I think that council is very well placed to support a lot of community groups and charities in kind and in advocacy. And I think this kind of support in kind and in advocacy it cannot be overestimated. And I think it is the role of the council to support in kind and in adequacy, but not using other people's money to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillors. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What this policy is, call a spade a spade. This policy is a policy about welfare transfer payment. For the most part, what we do here is make a donation or indeed some of the sponsorships to organisations with ratepayers' money for purposes that the ratepayers didn't pay the money to the council for. It's as simple as that. And it's transfer payments that are, in my view, inappropriate use of the money. There is absolutely no question that the organisations that come to the council and other organisations that perhaps don't come to the council but are equally warranting do a very good job in our community and are worthy of everything that gets donated to them. But it's inappropriate for us to be using other people's money to make donations. And that's the fundamental thing about this. That's what this policy is all about. It's all about council using ratepayers' money to donate to third parties. And I just don't support that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall? Only? No? Okay. Councillor Watson, in closing.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. For those organisations that come forward and look for sponsorship and donations, the policy and the criteria that's written out in it, we can reject things, and if they're politically aligned parties or events or things like that, we can move not to accept it because it doesn't fill in the criteria of the policy. So more than happy to have this motion put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillors, I put the motion. All those in favour? All those opposed? We have a split vote once again. I will exercise my casting vote by voting for the motion. Therefore, the motion is carried. Councillors, you'd like it recorded. Thank you very much. Those that were against, Councillor Hall, Councillor Mildren and Councillor Quilty. Those in favour, Councillor Watson, Councillor Simpendorfer and Councillor Polton. Casting vote carried the motion. On to item 8.9. Councillor Mildren. Yep, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a conflict because I am part of the Wodonga Senior Secondary College School Council.
Thank you very much. We'll give Councillor Mildren a moment to be excused from the room. All right, so item 8.9 is the community impact grants. Again, there's recommendations for these grants on page 208, the officer recommendation, obviously through the selection panel process. Would somebody like to move a motion, councillors? Councillor Watson, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Simpendorfer, thank you. Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's self-explanatory that all of these have gone through a rigorous panel review and the recommendations have come back to us and put the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A few IT issues, the screen's just frozen, so I've got a Word document. Yeah, I reiterate what Mr Councillor Watson just said. I've been through that process and support it as it stands.
Thank you. Councillor Quilty or Councillor Quilty.
Thank you. I repeat what I said earlier. We have lots of great community groups and dedicated volunteers in Wodonga. No doubt many of their projects are worthy of support, most definitely. However, the $20,685 as per the report in question belongs to the ratepayers of Wodonga. It is not the council's money to give away. The council should return this money to the ratepayers, and the ratepayers can make their own choice of how it should be allocated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Hall, did you have anything to add? Councillor Watson, in closing. Nothing further. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All opposed? Carried 3-2. Item 8.10. Oh, sorry, we'll allow Councillor Mildren to rejoin us. Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Have you got your technology in the right spot to move on to 8.1? Just checking you've got what you need in front of you. 8.10, sorry. Yeah, 8.10. Sorry, I left a word out. Ready to proceed? All right, this report presents the panel's recommendations for the Community Impact Infrastructure Grants. Officer recommendation based on that panel on page 227. Do I have, thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer, to move as per the recommendation, confirming Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson, thank you. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Mr Mayor, I think we've been down this road tonight about where we stand. I think I support the Community Impact Infrastructure Grants as they're tabled. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Other councillors? Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, going on from what I spoke about before, but this is a little different. If infrastructure is being provided and paid for by council, then one would expect that it be either a council-owned property or a property that's got direct connection to council ownership or council management and control through Crown Land or whatever other means. Again, any form of grant for infrastructure that's not council owned is in effect a transfer payment again. It's payment of money that the ratepayers have paid to the council for purposes under what the council should be doing, not to be handed over to non-council owned organisations. And this is exactly the same sort of thing, except for you might argue that the athletics club is a council owned place, in which case we should be bringing that up through the budget process and dealing with it as a specific activity or expenditure on a council-owned site and deal with it. And the same could probably be said about the Diamonds, Wodonga Diamonds soccer requirements for goals. It's infrastructure that relates to council-owned land, and that may well be acceptable and should come through the budget process, and it should be deliberated in the same way. To do it through this it's not giving everybody an equal playing field in my observation. So, yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall, thank you.
Look, I support most of what's on this, but the fact is I do, and I made mention at council before, that I really believe, like Councillor Mildren said, that things to do with the athletics club and the Diamonds, I believe should come up, well, the one come up in the rec budget and the other as maybe a submission, or it's part of, capital works, capital works budget. It's got merit, and dealing with it, this way, I not necessarily agree with the way it's dealt with. Anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you. My comment will be repeating what has been said already. I believe that improving of council infrastructure or infrastructure on council land or land associated to council should not, and I don't know why it does come through grant program. It should come through the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Simpfendorfer in closing. No further comment. I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All opposed? We've got a tie once again. I'll therefore exercise my casting vote and I'll vote for the motion. Therefore, the motion is carried. Councillors, I'm assuming you'll like that split again, would you? Or yeah, thank you. Councillor all those that were in favour of the motion, Councillor Simpfendorfer, Watson and Polton. All those that were opposed were Councillor Mildren, Councillor Hall and Councillor Quilty. The motion was carried using the exercise of casting vote of the Mayor. Item 8.11, the Community Impact Partnership Program for 2021. The report presented by the panel's recommendations for the Community Impact Partnership Program, a recommendation on page 239, Councillors. Councillor Mildren, what have you got for me?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move a motion in relation to this matter. I move that the recommendation of the assessment panel not to award any grants under the Community Impact Partnership Program grants be adopted. And point 2, the policy in respect to the Community Impact Partnership Program, the Community Impact Infrastructure Grants and the Community Impact Grants be revoked effective from the conclusion of the round of grants in 2020-2021 financial year, and that appropriate requests for project funding be submitted to Council for consideration and determination annually as part of a normal budgetary deliberations. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is all about the nature and use of ratepayers' money, and it's about process, and it's about how we do things in an open, transparent manner, and how we actually have the money set aside through the budget process for physical infrastructure projects, and we can monitor it, monitor the expenditure through the budget process. The whole range of things is up there in the public arena. When we do it through the back door, so to speak, with other programs, like the programs that come under these types of policies, the level of accountability and how these things transpire is significantly reduced. Now, that's not casting any aspersion on anybody, and it's not making an allegation that anything's being done wrong. It's just talking about putting everything up in the community's eyes so the community knows everything that goes on. The other thing that comes into this is we've dealt with delegations today. Now, the regime that we have at the moment, the staff we have at the moment are trustworthy and they do everything fine. There's not an issue. The thing is how this transpires into the future with these sort of things, particularly if you get things where the amounts of money that can be expended, say, by officers or a CEO or by members of staff gets increased, and these things then start to fall into the delegation numbers, we're not even going to know what's being put out there for these grants. It'll just be processed and happen. Now, that might be a good thing in some eyes, but in my eyes, that's not transparent, that's not accountable, and it's abrogating responsibility of the councillors ourselves. And these are the things that we need to get straight and set in place so that the community can see everything absolutely transparently. It's not a casting aspersion, I'll say that again. It is not casting aspersions on any individuals or officers or any of the things that transpire. It's just making it all out there in the public. And that's what I think needs to happen with all of these things. We should be providing funds in our budget process that deal with all of our infrastructure for sporting and recreation facilities that we have, for public halls or meeting rooms or preschools or all of those things. They should all be up there and available for the people, the staff that run it or the organisations that use those facilities to come to council annually, every year at the budget process and put their submissions into the budget, and we prioritise them all against each other in a manner that's done in an appropriate community consultation process. We're not doing that with this sort of thing. It's sort of off to one side and it's dealt with. Some people know about it and other organisations don't. It's not out there in the open, and I think we need to change the way we do business. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Quilty?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Watson?
Once again, Mr. Mayor, I'll vote against this, and I'll foreshadow that if the motion fails, that the recommendation before us on page 227 be put. There seems to be a bit of a theme here tonight, Mr. Mayor, that all of these motions that are coming forward, and it would have been good to during the afternoon, because they're all printed out. I noticed that my fellow councillors have all these motions printed out, that they could have been forwarded to us as a team to see them, because if we had some time to think about them, we might have had a different way of voting on them. But yeah, I think there's a theme tonight, and it's very disappointing.
You, Councillor Watson. Councillors? Councillor Quilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm certainly sorry to hear that Councillor Watson is disappointed. I agree there is a theme here tonight, but the theme is here tonight because there are a number of points that are around similar issues and similar processes, therefore the theme. I apologize for introducing my motions just now, not alerting, because but councillor's job is demanding, is often combined with lots of other jobs and responsibilities, and on an occasion, rare occasion or often occasion, as the case may be, it may not be possible, or minds can be changed, or other considerations may come to mind to prompt different motions and different opinions. And like I said, as we talked earlier in the middle of the meeting today, I changed my mind about an issue I was going to vote on. As to Councillor Mildren's motion, I think this motion includes and enhances what has been said today above by myself and by Councillor Mildren and by Councillor Hall. I would like to emphasize, I've just written down after, as Councillor Mildren was talking, that his motion is not directed at a particular person or a particular occasion, no. It just promotes transparency, which I believe is very important and necessary, and advocates for sound fiscal process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. In closing, Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we're starting to talk about politics, which it seems is being inferred, then, and I don't wish to go to this path, and I will just brush across it and move on, but there is evidence on the other side of these debates tonight of the same sort of process. So if there is some sort of theme, then the themes are matched and equal and opposite. So I think we'll leave it at that and move on. In terms of why we do this, I've been very clear. This is all about transparency, it's all about accountability, and it's all about council's actions being out in the public arena quite openly. And the way we've been doing things in the past in these contexts is less than open and transparent. It is not an aspersion that anything untoward has been done. It is absolutely not that. It's simply that I want to see those things changed, because that's what I think our community wants to see. They want to know what's going on more clearly. And that's why I put the motions in the way I have, and that's why I've spoken the way I have on all of these related issues tonight. And if the theme's there, it's because the related issues have all come up tonight on the one agenda. Might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. It depends on your point of view. But that's the reason why it's there. And I urge the council to take responsibility for the way things happen in this place and put it out into the public arena, clear and open. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillors, I will, if I can, Councillor Mildren, just get you to read your motion again, please. That'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the recommendations of the assessment panel not to award any grants under the Community Impact Partnership program grants be adopted, and the policy in respect to the Community Impact Partnership Program, the Community Impact Infrastructure Grants, and the Community Impact Grants be revoked effective from the conclusion of the round of grants in the 2020-2021 financial year, and that the appropriate request for project funding be submitted to Council for consideration and determination annually as part of a normal budgetary deliberations. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All opposed? We have a 3 apiece tie once again. I'll exercise my casting vote by defeating the motion. Therefore, councillors, I am looking for a motion. I know, Councillor Watson, you foreshadowed as per the recommendation. Sorry, Councillor Mildren, do you want that split recorded? Thank you. Before we go forward with that. So those who are in favour of the motion were Councillor Mildren, Councillor Hall and Councillor Quilty. Those against, no, you're right, Councillor Hall. Those against were Councillor Simpfendorfer, Councillor Watson and Councillor Polton, and the Mayor's casting vote defeated the motion. We are on to a foreshadowed motion. Councillor Watson.
As I expressed some moments ago, put the recommendations on page 227, that recommendation go forward.
Does it have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
There is no need for any further discussion on this point. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. No, councillors? In closing, Councillor Watson? No? All right, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? All those opposed? I'll exercise with a 3 apiece vote. I'll exercise my casting vote to carry the motion. Therefore, I'm guessing we're going to split that one again, are we, councillors? Yes, please, thank you. So all those that are in favour were Councillor Watson, Councillor Simpfendorfer, Councillor Polton. All those against, Councillor Quilty, Councillor Mildren and Councillor Hall. Mayor exercised the casting vote to carry the motion. On to item, it's been a long day. 8.12, the March 2021 Quarterly Finance Report. There's presentation of the budget variations there, officer recommendation on 248, councillors. Does anybody wish to move a motion? Councillor Simpfendorfer, as per the recommendation, was it? Yes, Councillor Quilty, I saw your hand went up a second. Were you seconding as per the recommendation? Yeah, okay, excellent, thank you. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
No, Mr Mayor, I think it speaks for itself, the quarterly finance report with a few amendments in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty.
Thank you. No, I don't have any further comments. There is a very good summary explaining the variations included, the quarterly report and the monthly report. So no, I don't have any further comments at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillors, any further commentary? In closing, Councillor Simpfendorfer, I'm guessing you don't have much more to add. Okay, I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 8.13, the Waste Transfer Station, tender for transportation of waste materials. This is the transportation of materials from the Waste Transfer Station across the Albury Waste Management Centre. There is a an officer recommendation on page 267. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Watson. And a seconder? As per the recommendation, thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, this is a very important contract to have because we need to get our waste from Victoria into New South Wales. So what the recommendation before us should go through.
Councillor Simpfendorfer.
Reserve the right. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillors. Councillor Mildren.
Mr Mayor, I think there's probably a very minor error or omission in the document. I note that an officer who was part of the review assessment panel didn't get noted as in the bottom section of the report as not expressing not having a conflict. I don't think it's an important matter, but nonetheless it's housekeeping. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. That's been noted by the CEO. Councillor Quilty or Hall, anything to add? Councillor Hall.
Yeah, look, it's we need to transport, like Councillor Watson said, transport our waste over to Albury landfill, and so it's just a necessary agreement that needs to be signed off on.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. You reserved your right, Councillor Simpendorfer. Nothing further to add. Councillor Watson, in closing, nothing. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 8.14, the waiving of or rebate of planning and building application fees. This is a policy recommendation from the officer on page 247. Do I have somebody to move that one as per the recommendation? Councillor Simpendorfer. A seconder? Councillors? Councillor Watson? Councillor Simpendorfer, you're away.
Right, thank you. Again, I'll keep it short. Again, fairly unremarkable, some changes in wording and percentage rates of the waiving of fees, but as per the recommendation and the attachments.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Nothing to add. Councillors? Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Fundamentally, I don't see the need for this policy because it's all covered in some considerable detail under the regulations. This policy does not override or change or give it an ability to interpret the regulations beyond the interpretation of the regulations themselves. So frankly, I don't see the value of it, but so long as we comply with the regulations, it doesn't matter really. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. In closing, Councillor Simpendorfer, nothing further to add. I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 8.15, Councillor Simpendorfer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I declared a conflict. I attempted to declare it to this afternoon, but somehow technically didn't go through. So as a, for transparency purposes, as a president of the North East Blue Ribbon Foundation, there has been an approach to the applicant for some support in an event, which could be a perception of conflict, so I'll stand down.
Thank you, Councillor Simpendorfer. All good, thank you. So item 8.15, once again, it's a Jacob Group of Companies, section 96A, proposed planning scheme amendment and planning permit application for Jacob Group of Companies. There's an officer recommendation on page 285. Moving, thank you, Councillor Mildren.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an alternative motion. Yep. Mr Mayor, I'd like to move that the Council refuse the request to prepare a combined planning scheme amendment and planning permit process in accordance with section 96A of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 on the grounds that the proposal lacks strategic justification. Point number 2, that Council undertakes a detailed strategic planning evaluation of the issue broadly and the spatial land use and development conflict more specifically to identify suitable solutions and, as may be appropriate, prepare a strategy which either confirms the present zoning, use and development delineations or provides the necessary strategic justification to support change consistent with the identified solution. Not a problem. Yeah, I'll move with adjourn. Yep.
Hang on. A mover to head back into the meeting. Thanks again, Councillor Mildren and Quilty. Councillor Mildren, fire away.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Appreciate the planning expertise that's reviewed the motion. I think that's ironic. Basically, there's a whole history to what's gone on with this matter, and in a broad sense, rather than a specifically application process, it's been lingering on for a very long time. We have a very real and quite serious urban planning problem at this location, with considerable and increasing land use and development conflict between residential uses on the one hand and commercial activities on adjacent land on the other hand. Significant part of the commercial land is owned and occupied by a very successful, economically important and growing local group of businesses in the motor vehicle sales and service industry. Additionally, there are other smaller adjacent industries that also share a common boundary with Anderson Street residential land. The residential land is broadly a former government housing estate in which many of the properties are now privately owned residences. The growth of the commercial business group is such that it is expanding in the direction of the residential properties on the north side of Anderson Street directly and impacting on those properties and less directly impacting upon the residential amenity of other properties on the south side of Anderson Street. The large business operator has been expressing a desire to address the issue for some considerable years, but would seem not prepared to do so in a big picture, longer term way, and would seem unwilling to meet the associated strategic planning costs. Hence the situation we find ourselves in today, with a strategically unjustifiable incremental planning response which fails to deal with the wider long-term consequential issues. I see that the Council has no material option in the specific response to the application at hand but to refuse it on the grounds that it is strategically unjustifiable in the current circumstances. Council's strategic planning policy presently does not extend to allowing expansion of the commercial area in this location, and no substantive strategic planning work has been done to justify a change to that strategic position. However, it is well understood that there is a planning conflict that needs resolution sooner rather than later. I believe it is unfair on the residents to have this level of encroaching commercial development pressure constantly impacting on their quality of life, and it is inappropriate for uncertainty created by strategic planning to be restricting or standing in the way of natural commercial growth and business decision making. A full and comprehensive strategic evaluation of the issue may result in a determination that the commercial group have outgrown the reasonably available land suited to commercial use and development, and may be better to look at an alternative location. However, without a proper evaluation, the solution will never be reached and the problems will continue for all involved. Ordinarily, where a business wants to change in planning rules, it is required to undertake the relevant work to pursue the change at their cost. However, in this case, we have adversely impacted residents having their quality of life and amenity affected by the encroachment, and more particularly by the relentless uncertainty. Consequently, I believe Council has an obligation to seek to break the relentlessness and uncertainty and to undertake detailed strategic planning evaluation to draw a line and make a determination to the most appropriate long-term outcome. In this context, Council should independently undertake the work. The business owners and residents will have to accept the solution reached, and will be very unlikely that further alternative strategic planning options would be supported. Whatever the answer is that we find, we've given ample understanding and opportunity for the business to undertake the strategic planning, which would have given them an opportunity for significant input. They've chosen not to do that. That's their prerogative. We have an obligation to our residents to put a stop to this uncertainty and the relentlessness of it. I can't imagine what it would be like to live in one of the places that's directly affected by this and have suffered the relentless uncertainty that's brought about the impact on amenity and so on these residents have actually experienced. So I believe it's beholding on Council to undertake this. I deliberately didn't put a time frame into this. I trust the Council officers to get on with it without delay, because that's what needs to happen. But I felt that there's a fairly significant amount of work here, and we need to be able to set that in train. I know we have a strategic planning unit, and in other councils and the other places, the strategic planning units most probably have, or most usually have, the capability to carry out these sort of things. We may or may not have that. The decision on how this gets done is not mine, and in the context of the organisation, it's not the council. The decision is that we want this to be done, and I'm trusting the staff to do it without delay. So I put the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Quilty. Reserving the right. Councillors. Councillor Hall.
Look, I was looking at this because I've been on the prior council and I know this has been an ongoing situation, and Ron's obviously picked up on the same issue, and it's time we dealt with this issue. It's been going on for way too long, and we need solid outcomes for the stakeholders. There needs to be some certainty for them going forward, knowing that council will address the issues sooner than later. This work, strategic work, needs to be done, and I believe it's time that council takes the lead on this and does it. And as basic as that, and that's basically what I thought after this coming back up to council, and with the proposals that Jacob Toyota put forward, and I just don't see any other way bar for us council to take the lead.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Watson, anything to add?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. We were fortunate enough to have the Jacob Group of companies come and have a submission to us, and what my learned gentleman on my right, Councillor Mildren, has said tonight is quite enlightening. However, you know, at short notice, it is very hard to take all that information in, and so therefore, you know, I'm of an open view, but yeah, it would have been nice to have a bit of a discussion after the submission from the Jacob Company. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors in one of the council briefings have been provided a report, more than one report on this issue, and according to those reports, this conflict, this, as Councillor Mildren said, the planning conflict, I really like those words, I've written them down, has existed for a really long time, beyond previous council. And I think it's causing a lot of grief to all the parties involved. And I think it would be great if we could resolve it. And what Councillor Mildren has proposed will cost the council. And I usually, you know, try to be frugal. However, a solution needs to be found. And it has not been found yet. Many years have passed and the solution has not been found. And people are stressed. Residents are stressed. Jacob's Toyota have this uncertainty. What Councillor Mildren has proposed is a process that may lead us out of this and lead the other parties out of this. And should we decide to go down this path, whatever comes out of it will provide certainty to the residents and Jacob's Toyota, and even if it is decision that some parties may not like, it will be the decision that will end the conflict and that will give us a clear way forward. Therefore, I'll be supporting the motion put forward by Councillor Mildren. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. In closing, any further comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've been talking about this in this council in the manner in which we are legally able to talk about it for a very, very long time. So I just don't understand Councillor Watson saying, oh, it's a surprise to me and I can't support it because it's a surprise. I just don't get that. As we all know, we can take deputations from people in briefings, we can ask questions in briefings, we cannot debate and we cannot make even straw poll decisions in briefing meetings. So there is no way we could have gone and debated or negotiated or discussed any of the stuff that I've basically raised today. And in fact, everything I've raised today is things that have been presented to us by the council staff in one form or another over the last couple of years. So it's not as if there's anything in here that's any secret or is something that's been pulled out of the sky or it's jumped up in a hurry. It's all been around. I've put it in my words. I've spoken to it in the way that I perceive the problem is, and I've spoken to it in a manner that is consistent with my professional knowledge in these things. I think this matter has to have a solution to it. It's grossly unfair of us to just let it roll on. We have to deal with it, and we have to deal with it without delay. And I trust the officers will deal with it without delay, and I trust the officers will find a way to get it to a solution. And using this resolution gives the power to the staff to go away and do it. So I think this is the way we should be proceeding with it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Councillor Simpendorfer back into the room, please. On to item 8.16, and I believe Councillor Mildren. Just explanation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A family member is in the processes of securing a dwelling on land that's owned by the JMP, the proponents of the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Just before we proceed, and while are you on the right page, Councillor Simpendorfer? That's okay. Item 8.16, the Planning Scheme Amendment C135, Riverside Estate proposed minor changes for re-endorsement. There's a recommendation on page 330. Would somebody like to move a motion? Councillor Simpendorfer, as per the recommendation. Thank you. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpendorfer.
The negotiations, as per the paper between JMP and the council, have been ongoing for some time, and resulting in this paper that's come up to us tonight. I see there are minor editorial changes to the amendment documentation, and supportive of the paper as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Comment, councillors. Councillor Hall.
Yeah, look, it does in the summary state that JMP have been in agreements with the reach changes, and so I don't see an issue with supporting this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Quilty, anything further to add? In closing, Simpendorfer, nothing further. Therefore, I put the motion. All in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. We'll allow Councillor Mildren to return to the room. Item 9, councillors, is reports for noting, of which there are none. We'll go into item 10, the 5 reports for information. None of these require council resolution, so I will move through them quickly. Councillors, as always, I invite you to just pull me up where you need to if you want to add any commentary to any of the reports. 10.1, the planning report for January 2021 on page 359. 10.2, the building report for January 2021 on page 362. The 10.3, competitive service report for January 2021 on 368. That's a very good point. Thank you. It's March. Good pickup. We had the confidence to correct the chair. Thank you. The record of councillor meetings on 10.4, councillors. The decisions register on 10.5. Thank you. Item 11 is notices of motion, of which there are none. Item 12 is petitions, of which there are none. Item 13 is the common seal, of which there are none. General business, councillors. Any general business tonight? Thank you, Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to make comment on Hall Street on our side of our building with the upstream funding. we have a fantastic mural that's going to be pride and place in our city, and I congratulate Simone's team, or the officers and the staff, that this is a great project that's come to fruition, and it's a pleasure to look at those amazing faces and the artist works that's been done.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While we're on the issue of art, I note that a local Wodonga artist has actually got an entry in the Archibald Prize this year. Whether or not it gets into the full show remains yet to be seen. I've seen the work and I think it is absolutely extraordinary. Perhaps when we're looking at murals in the future, we might be having a look to speak to him to do it. He's done an absolutely extraordinary job on the work that he's put into the Archibald Prize. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillors, all over and out at item 14. Item 15, urgent business, of which there's none. Item 16, question time. We have 2 questions this evening. CEO, I know you've got other questions at hand and also the responses. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. We've had 2 questions from our community. The first one is from Mr. Chris Phillips, who asked some questions in relation to the library. Firstly, is the library on budget? And if not, what is the now projected forecast? Related to that, if this project is over budget, why does our council struggle to bring projects in on budget? After all, it is ratepayers' money being used to fund these projects. So I guess I'm pleased to report that the Library Gallery project is very much on budget and on time. In fact, with the works nearing completion, we anticipate there will be an underspend on that project. And I think that given the challenges faced by everybody as a result of COVID-19, this is a remarkable opportunity, a remarkable outcome. I'd certainly like to congratulate the council staff who have been involved and the contractor in making it happen, particularly when some of the critical equipment had to be flown in from overseas as opposed to being shipped in because of those supply chain issues over COVID. The project has also allowed us to undertake some additional unplanned works, yet still within the available budget, such as significantly increasing the power available in the precinct, thereby future-proofing it for other projects in the years to come. In terms of council struggling to bring projects in on budget, this project is not over budget, as suggested by Mr. Phillips, and it's uncertain on what grounds Mr. Phillips believes that council struggles to bring projects in on budget, as his claims are not supported by evidence. When he talks about ratepayers, we are very careful as to how we spend ratepayers' funds, and that's been a common theme this evening. Although I would point out that most of our major projects, including the library and gallery, are generally heavily co-funded by the government, either state or federal. Checks and balances are in place to ensure the community that value for money is always a primary concern for us, as is the best possible outcomes for the community. I hope that will answer Mr. Phillips' question, and we'll send a written response to him. The second question is from Mr. Phil Day, and this is a question in relation to climate change. No doubt the City of Wodonga would be aware that there has been a significant amount of evidence, e.g. from the Australian Academy of Science and the Climate Council, indicating that net zero emissions by 2050 won't be sufficient to avoid going above 1.5 degrees and frighteningly damaging impacts of climate change, and that we must accelerate our efforts and targets for emission reductions now. How will the City of Wodonga accelerate greenhouse gas emission reductions in accordance with this new evidence, and to reduce the burden of needing to do much more and much more quickly than anticipated and indicated by DELP on their climate change targets 2021 to 2030 webpage? In response, the Wodonga Council obviously takes its responsibilities towards emissions reductions very seriously and encourages the Wodonga community to join us in meeting the net zero emissions target by 2050 and as set out in the Climate Change Act 2017. At its meeting in July 2019, the Wodonga Council resolved to participate in a statewide tender process, which would see 100% of this council's electricity requirements being met by renewable energy. This process is now concluded, and it's anticipated that from the 1st of July, the Wodonga Council will move to being completely reliant on renewable energy for its electricity needs. It has been estimated that this move alone could reduce this council's emissions by up to 80%. So a good news story. Obviously, council has a range of other emission-reducing measures in place, including having replaced approximately 2,500 suburban street lights with LED lighting. We've also installed LED solar panel lights to walking and cycleways throughout the city, and we're considering replacing approximately another 1,000 main road street lights through 2021 and 2022, obviously subject to budget approval. Other measures implemented over recent years include improved efficiencies when irrigating council's playing fields, parks and community open spaces, continued replanting of these open spaces with indigenous and drought-tolerant trees and shrubs, inclusion of hybrid vehicles onto council's vehicle fleet, and the installation of energy reduction features to new facilities or as existing facilities are upgraded. Council has installed solar panels to many of its buildings, including additional panels more recently to the Cube, as a good example. The Council has also adopted its climate change policy at its meeting on the 15th of March 2021, committing itself to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through appropriate mitigation strategies. These strategies are largely included within the Council's Climate Change Adaptation Action Plan, which is scheduled to be comprehensively reported on in the next 2 to 3 months. Again, I hope that answers Mr. Phil Day's question, and a copy of that response will go to him personally. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Item 17, confidential business. There's no confidential business, councillors, and there's also in item 18, no confidential urgent business. Therefore, at around just short of 8:15, I call the meeting closed. Thank you, one and all, for attending.